Disappointment, theft, online scams, fraud, forged signatures, and finally murder, but his mother says he's not her attacker. Decades of crimes targeting lonely men included fraud, theft, bigamy, attempted murder, and finally murder. Today she's not in jail. He dropped out of school in 7th grade, served several sentences for petty crimes, won the lottery, and then disappeared. A hotel inheritance, an affair with a porn star, a prenuptial agreement, a murdered mother, murdered for jealousy and greed. Before we go any further, everything in this video that has not been proven in a court of law as alleged accused are my opinion only. Today we're going to look at 4 times when greed led to murder. We'll start with Peter Porco's murder right after my overly obnoxious trigger warning. Roll the intro. When Peter Porco didn't show up for work as a court officer on November 15, 2004, another court officer was sent to his home to check on him. Peter Porco was found near the front door where he had apparently bled out after a violent attack. His wife lay barely clinging to life in the bed where the attack happened. The weapon was a fire axe laying near Joan Porco. The attack had obviously happened during the night. The phone was dead, so the court officer used his cell phone to call 911. But how did we get here? Peter and Joan Porco have 2 sons, Jonathan and Christopher. Jonathan Porco was in the military and could not have possibly been physically present when the attacks happened. Christopher was in college and staying on campus about a 4-hour drive away. It would have been difficult, but not impossible for him to commit the crimes. But the extended family also has mob ties, which could extend the suspect pool. Peter's uncle, Frank Porco, was a captain in the Gambino crime family, one of the big 5 mafia families in New York. Frank served time for a loan sharking and extortion. Additionally, Frank worked a straight job as a fireman, which earned him the mob nickname of the Fireman. This could explain the use of a fireman's axe as the weapon for the attack. The fact that the axe belonged to the Porcos and seems more a weapon of opportunity than a planned message makes this a long shot. Thanks to the police and first responders made it even more unlikely, which is why the police never even pursued this theory offered by the defense at the trial. When police were canvassing the neighborhood, a neighbor reported seeing Christopher Porco's yellow Jeep in the driveway the evening before the brutal attack. Detective Christopher Bowdish was able to ask Joan some questions as first responders reported to the scene. Detective Bowdish asked Joan if she knew the attacker and she nodded yes. He asked if the attacker was her son Jonathan and she shook her head no. He asked her if the attacker was Christopher and she nodded yes. Joan does not remember this happening and to this day asserts Christopher's innocence. Under questioning, Christopher stated that he was asleep in a dormitory lounge when the attack happened. Classmates did not remember him sleeping in the lounge. Christopher drove a distinctive neon yellow late model Jeep Wrangler with extra wide tires and a cow catcher. Not a good vehicle to commit crimes in. The toll collector at the Henrietta entrance to the thruway remembers a Jeep matching this description with a young man driving past around 10:45 p.m. About 3 hours and 10 minutes later, the toll collector at the Albany exit remembers the same vehicle getting off at a high rate of speed. Security cameras on the campus also show a Jeep matching this description leaving and returning to campus at the correct times to be the same vehicle in these sightings. This is enough for the police to focus on Christopher, but what was his motive? Almost exactly 2 years before the murder, Peter and Joan's home was broken into. A Macintosh laptop, a Dell laptop, and a camera were stolen. The camera was later retrieved from the front yard. One of the computers turned up in California in 2005. After retrieving the laptop and investigating its cross-country journey, police learned that Christopher had sold the laptop on eBay 8 months after the robbery. Christopher had also sold items on eBay and never sent them. He pretended to be Jonathan, sending emails explaining he was dead and unable to complete the transactions. This was only the beginning of nefarious behavior on Christopher's part. Christopher decided to spend his 2004 spring break in England. While there, Joan Porco sends him an email with the subject line, "Failing grades, you did it again." Christopher was enrolled in Hudson Valley Community College at this time. Christopher responded several days later in an email to Peter Porco, "Obviously, they're incorrect. My lowest grade that I got on anything was a B on a physics test." Christopher later forged transcripts from this college to earn readmission into the University of Rochester, or UR, for the fall semester. Christopher's tension with his parents reached beyond grades. Upon re-entering UR, Christopher took out $31,000 in student loans to pay his debts and forged his father's signature on the documents. He had told his parents that he was readmitted because a professor had misplaced his final exam and the university was providing this semester free of charge as an apology. 2 weeks before the murder, Peter sent Christopher an email that in part reads, "Did you forge my signature as a cosigner? What the hell are you doing? You should have called me to discuss it. I'm calling Citibank this morning to find out what you have done, and I'm going to tell them I'm not to be on it as a cosigner." When Peter contacted Citibank the next day, he learned that he was also a cosigner on that Jeep I described earlier. This caused Peter to send Christopher an email in part reading, "I want you to know that if you abuse my credit again, I will be forced to file forgery affidavits in order to disclaim the liability, and that applies to the Citibank college loan if you attempt to reactivate it, or use my credit to obtain any other loan. We may be disappointed with you, but your mother and I still love you and care about your future." This was enough of a motive for the jury to find Christopher guilty of the second-degree murder of Peter and attempted murder of Joan. They couldn't prove if the deadly confrontation was intended or if it just happened as a planned discussion escalated, so they couldn't get a first-degree conviction. Christopher was sentenced to 2 consecutive 25-to-life terms. He will serve at least 50 years in prison before being paroled. If you'd like to see a feature video on this case, let me know in a comment. 10 years before Christopher attacked his parents, Dena Thompson took her second husband's life, but she wouldn't be convicted of the offense until 2005. In the early hours of July 1st, 1994, an ambulance was summoned to the Douglas Close residence of Dena and Julian Webb. Mrs. Webb had called them. Julian was unresponsive. She reported speaking to him just minutes before calling for the ambulance. However, when they arrived at the hospital, doctors determined that Julian had been dead for at least 2 hours. But how did we get here? In 1960, Michael and Margaret Holmes gave birth to Dena Holmes in the North London neighborhood of Hendon. Raised by a prison officer and his wife, her early life seems to be uneventful. By the age of 22, she was working at Woolwich Building Society when she met her first husband. According to Investopedia, a building society is similar to a credit union in the U.S. They are owned by the members and offer mortgages and demand deposit accounts. While working at Woolwich, Dena Holmes met Lee Wyatt in 1982. The two moved into a house in Green Oaks, Lansing, and were married in 1984. Dena and Lee Wyatt founded Dena Lee Crafts, a company that made and distributed plush toys. They designed a leprechaun toy they believed would be their ticket to Easy Street, but the film it supported went bust. Following this, Mrs. Wyatt convinced Lee Wyatt he needed to go into hiding. He was living a vagabond life under an assumed name and hiding from a made-up group called the G-Men. Mrs. Wyatt had convinced him the G-Men wanted him dead. She was also embezzling money from Woolwich. While Mr. Wyatt was in hiding, Mrs. Wyatt met Julian Webb. Mrs. Wyatt moved in with Mr. Webb in Arundel. The two married and Mrs. Wyatt became Mrs. Webb, except she forgot to divorce Mr. Wyatt first. This made her a bigamyst. Mrs. Webb had also convinced Mr. Webb that a new life was waiting for them in Florida. This is where our story started. In the early hours of July 1st, 1994, an ambulance was summoned to the Douglas Close residence of Dena and Julian Webb. The suspicious death was investigated, but Mrs. Webb claimed suicide, and lacking evidence against her, the inquest ended with an open verdict on August 25, 1994. Mrs. Webb rapidly began promising a new life in Florida to a succession of gentlemen callers. We don't have details on most of these men, as they are mostly married and managed to keep it from their wives, so did not want to come forward publicly. In 1995, she went to Florida with Robert Waite. He thought she would soon be dead from a growth on her kidneys, which was just another lie of hers. Only weeks after this trip, Mrs. Webb was in jail. The thefts and fraud from Woolwich finally caught up with her. During the trial, she presented letters written by Mr. Wyatt implicating him and exonerating her. The prosecution presented Mr. Wyatt, who informed the jury that she had duped him into writing those letters and they were not true. The jury believed Mr. Wyatt. She was sentenced to 18 months in jail. After her release, Mrs. Webb trolled the Lonely Hearts ads again. She met Richard Thompson in 1998 and married him in 1999. Dena Webb became Dena Thompson. Mr. Thompson believed his new wife was a college-teaching, antique-dealing, breast and ovarian cancer-having woman when he married her on a beach in Florida. She also told him she had contacts which could set him up as a charter boat captain in the Florida Keys. He took a £38,000 early retirement package to facilitate this. She told him she won £300,000 in the national lottery, but the money was in a bank in Jersey, England. He gave her $3,000 to put a down payment on a home in Florida. Instead, she paid off the credit card he didn't know she took out in his name. Mrs. Thompson inquired about cashing in Mr. Thompson's £89,000 life insurance policy. The insurance company informed him. Her lies began to unravel. She had a plan, a little BDSM with him tied while she stabbed and beat him. He survived the attack. She was tried for attempted murder. Mrs. Thompson used self-defense, pleaded guilty to the 15 counts of fraud for the thefts from Mr. Thompson and others. She claimed he attempted to kill her due to the fraud. She was acting in self-defense. The jury bought it. She pleaded guilty to the lesser charges, and English authorities got suspicious about her second husband's death. Mr. Webb's body was exhumed, which is super difficult in England. The authorities, the church, and the family all have to agree. Mr. Webb's mother had been campaigning to bring Mrs. Thompson to justice since his death. The toxicology report determined that he was given a lethal dose of antidepressants and aspirin. It is believed the antidepressants were given to him in his favorite hot curry dish on his birthday, and the aspirin were dissolved in drinks the same day. Yeah, the psycho killed him on his birthday. She was given a life sentence, but in the UK only a whole life sentence, like Lucy Letby got, video linked in the end screen, does not offer the chance at parole. We will come back to this after we talk about what she did while she was in prison. In prison, she became a master cross-stitcher and took part in a prison program that allowed her art to be publicly displayed and sold. Two of her higher-grossing pieces are felt cakes on records titled If Music Be the Food of Love, and a sleeveless dress made of ring poles and wool titled On the Pole. The money she earned from selling her art is one of the reasons the parole board decided to grant her parole. The parole board felt that since her motives were related to money, the fact that she now has her own money makes her less of a threat to men. If that's true, then why did she attack and kill men who made enough money to live comfortably without her having to work? But anyway, she's free, and I don't recommend getting into a relationship with her. If you would like more information, a book titled Black Widow, the true story of how Dena Thompson lured men into a twisted web of sex, lies, and murder was written in 2012. It is out of print, but there is a link to the Amazon page in the description. Some used copies may be available. Now let's talk about a murderous woman and a lottery winner. On November 9, 2009, Cedric Edom contacted Polk County, Florida Sheriff's Office to report his friend Abraham Shakespear missing. Edom hadn't seen his friend since April. Edom believes that Dee Dee Moore and Judith Haggins are involved in the disappearance, but he is not certain how. Cedric tells the police an unbelievable tale of rags to riches that started in 1966 with Abraham's birth. In November of 2006, Abraham had a criminal record 30 years long. In 1995, he was released from prison. The functionally illiterate 30-year-old Abraham worked odd jobs. In 2001, Abraham's girlfriend gave birth to their son. Abraham was $6,000 behind on child support. In November of 2006, Shakespeare purchased 2 quick pick lottery tickets at a convenience store. One hit the $30 million jackpot. Abraham started giving money to friends and family and set up a $1 million trust for his son. Abraham also bought himself a $1.1 million house in the gated community he always dreamed of living in and a nice car. By October of 2008, Abraham had $4.5 million in cash, real property, and debts owed to him. That's when he met Dee Dee Moore, who quickly became Abraham's financial advisor. He did not properly diversify. Within months of meeting Moore, he moved money into accounts she had access to through her company, American Medical Professionals, or AMP. This included liquidating a $250,000 annuity account in January of 2009 and putting the money in the Bank of America, or BOA. Abraham transferred ownership of his home to Moore. Moore claimed she paid roughly half what the property was worth. Moore stated she withheld payment because Abraham had a drug problem and she feared the money would be squandered. Moore also stated she did not pay to avoid gift taxes. Police could not verify any payments to Abraham around the time of the transfer. On February 9, 2009, a business named Abraham Shakespear LLC was created. Moore was the agent and director. The following day, this corporation opened a BOA account with $10. Moore was the only signator. On February 11, 2009, Abraham signed quitclaim deeds on 2 more properties and an asset purchase agreement for his unenumerated assets, giving possession of about $3.5 million worth of property and assets to AMP for $185,000, or 5 cents on the dollar. 5 additional properties valued at almost $384,000 mortgages were signed over to AMP for free. The documents for these were prepared by attorney David Howard Stitzel, whose law offices were in a building owned by Krasnicki, Moore's boyfriend. Moore provided articles of incorporation and meeting minutes to BOA stating Abraham should be added as a signatory. Then a $1,095,000 check from Abraham was deposited into the BOA account. Judith, a longtime friend of Abraham, was his driver, personal assistant, and an officer in this company. On February 17th, meeting minutes filed describe undisclosed criminal activity by Abraham and support Moore's request to remove Abraham as a signatory. Then, 2 $250,000 cashier's checks were written on the account, one to Krasnicki, the other to AMP. Just 19 days after over $1 million was deposited, only $44,296 of it was left. In April of 2009, Krasnicki purchased a $253,000 home with an AMP check. This coincides with the last time Edom saw his friend, and this is where our story started. On November 9, 2009, Cedric Edom contacted Polk County, Florida Sheriff's Office to report his friend Abraham Shakespear missing. On November 12, 2009, Attorney Stitzel reported to Detectives David Clark and David Wallace that he spoke with Abraham on October 6th. On December 3rd, Moore told Clark and Wallace that Abraham left his phone with her and instructed her to text people on his behalf. Moore confirmed neither she nor Stitzel had spoken to Abraham on October 6th. Moore further explained that she directed Stitzel to lie. Stitzel instructed Moore to stop talking to law enforcement. Moore stated Abraham's assets were transferred to avoid paying child support. Stitzel appeared in court and stated Abraham was receiving treatment abroad. The Ledger quoted Stitzel, "The last time Stitzel talked with Abraham was in October when they discussed child support issues." In March 2007, Abraham purchased a $100,000 BMW. In January 2009, Moore purchased a Lincoln MKS. Moore took possession of the BMW and Abraham the Lincoln. In April 2009, Moore traded the Lincoln in on a Chevy Silverado for $31,000. Abraham purchased a Ford 500 in July 2007. It was given to the mother of Abraham's infant in April 2009. In May, Haggins used her power of attorney, or POA, detailed later, to repossess the car. In June, Moore sold the car to Stingray Chevrolet for $9,000. In February 2009, Moore purchased a $70,000 Corvette from Stingray Chevrolet for Krasnicki with an AMP cashier's check. In March, Moore purchased a $90,000 Hummer. On December 5th, she attempted to sell the Hummer to Stingray Chevrolet for $49,000. A friend of the owner, William Smith, purchased the vehicle. In April 2009, notary Ambrose E. Austin notarized a POA giving Haggins control of Abraham's signature. Haggins and Abraham were both present. The POA was utilized to sign court documents and close Abraham's accounts. Monies were deposited into Moore's accounts. Gregory Smith's mother's mortgage was transferred to AMP. After becoming an informant through events discussed later, Smith recorded a conversation with Haggins. She stated Abraham had concerns regarding Moore and his money. Around the same time, Moore asked Haggins to keep Abraham from the bank because some money was not there. Financial records revealed several discrepancies in Moore's story, giving possession of about $3.5 million worth of property and assets to AMP for $185,000 or 5 cents on the dollar. Moore admitted that she had not paid any money to Abraham for his home, his assets, or debts owed to him. April of 2009 found Moore in complete control of Abraham's assets without paying for them. Abraham was asking questions. Abraham's last confirmed sighting was in early April of 2009 by Courtney Daniels. The two had an on and off relationship for many years previous to this, so she would know Abraham on sight. On December 27, 2009, Abraham's mother was eating with Moore when she received a call from someone claiming to be Abraham. She was unconvinced of the caller's identity. The call was placed from a phone owned by Smith. On December 28, 2009, police observed Smith meeting with Moore. And that is how Smith became an informant. Moore typed a letter from Abraham and wanted Smith to place it in Abraham's mother's mailbox. Moore asked Smith if he knew anyone that would be willing to plead guilty to murdering Abraham for $50,000. Police send in Officer Mike Smith to play the part. Officer Smith agreed to take the rap but told Moore he would need details for the police. Moore took Smith to a concrete slab on the same property as Stitzel's law office that was poured on April 13, 2009, and marked the place where Abraham's body was buried with a piece of metal. A Ford F-150 with a trailer attached sat nearby. Moore provided Smith the keys to the truck and a .38 Special, the murder weapon. The next day, search warrants were served on the Moore and Krasnicki residences, including Stitzel's law office, and under the concrete pad. Moore provided several accounts of Abraham's murder. Drug dealers killed Abraham with her gun. She killed Abraham in self-defense. Cedric Edom, Abraham's cousin who reported him missing, did it. Her 14-year-old son shot Abraham. Stitzel shot Abraham. Moore asked detectives if she could keep her things if she was honest about who shot Abraham. Haggins confirmed she closed Abraham's accounts at Moore's request. Abraham's body and two .38 caliber bullets were found under the pad. One constant across Moore's story was that 2 shots were fired, and 2 bullets were retrieved from Abraham's body. In 2012, Moore was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life without the possibility of parole, which is the same year Narcy Novack was convicted for murdering her husband, Ben. On July 12, 2009, Narcissa or Narcy Bernice Novack contacted authorities to state her husband Ben Novack Jr. was unresponsive in their suite at the Rybrook Hilton. When EMS responded to the scene, they found Mr. Novack in bed having been beaten badly with dumbbells. His eyes had been gouged out and sliced with a box cutter. Ben was pronounced dead at the scene. But how did we get here? Ben Novack Jr. grew up in the Fontainebleau in Miami Beach during the hotel's heyday. His parents had built and operated the upscale hotel, which hosted the likes of Elvis Presley, Sammy Davis Jr., Dean Martin, and Frank Sinatra. By the late 1970s, Miami Beach had lost its appeal to the rich and famous as a vacation spot, and the hotel was having financial difficulties. In 1977, Ben Novack Sr. was forced to sell the establishment as part of a bankruptcy process. By the time of his death in 1985, Ben Sr.'s estate was worth about $1 million, the bulk of which was inherited by Ben Jr. Ben Jr. set up Novack Enterprises, Inc., which did business as Convention Concepts Unlimited. He married Narcy in 1991. They had a stormy marriage. At one point, Ben even filed for divorce. It was later withdrawn when they reconciled. In 2008, Ben responded to a personal ad from Rebecca Bliss, a former porn star and high-priced escort. According to her testimony, she and Ben were having an affair and he planned on leaving Narcy. Narcy found out about the affair in early 2009 and offered Bliss $10,000 to end it. Bliss quoted Narcy saying if she couldn't have him, no other woman was going to have him. It is believed that after this, Narcy and her brother Cristobal Veliz began plotting to kill Ben and his mother Bernice Novack. Ben and Narcy had an ironclad prenuptial agreement. Narcy believed that if the two divorced, she would be left destitute as a result of this contract. However, Ben's will left millions to Narcy if he died before having it rewritten. Ben was close to his mother, who still worked in an executive role at Ben's company. So Narcy believed her best option was to facilitate the end of Ben's life and take his mother out as well so she couldn't contest the inheritance or cause legal issues. Narcy contacted Valise with this idea. Narcy and Valise recruited Alejandro Garcia and Joel Gonzalez from the local car wash to help with their plan. In April of 2009, Bernice was moving her car into the garage when Garcia attacked her with a monkey wrench and beat her to death. Even though she had several broken teeth, a broken jaw, and a fractured skull, the death was originally attributed to accidental falls. I guess she slipped on all that ice they have in Miami. It was reclassified as homicide after her son's death, which was detailed at the start of this segment. In 2012, a 6-week trial laid out the case against Narcy and Valise. Gonzalez and Valise both testified at the trial after pleading guilty. Narcy and Valise were both found guilty of multiple counts related to the plots and the deaths. Both received life sentences that are currently being served in federal penitentiaries. Let's wrap up this video. People often think that money will solve their problems, while a wealthy person never wonders where their next meal is coming from or about having utilities shut off. There are other worries that come with money. If you have any bad habits, money provides the opportunity to engage in them to an unlimited degree. Also, people are greedy. There's a reason it's one of the deadly sins after all. People are also covetous, which is another deadly sin. So when you have money, you also have to be wary of other people's greed, as it might just be your downfall. In these 4 stories, we have seen greed push people into killing spouses, parents, and even strangers. When you have money, you never know who you can trust and who might just be plotting how they can get their hands on it through any means necessary. Maybe you should just learn to enjoy whatever socioeconomic status you have instead of wishing it would change. Until next time, I got a jam, so tag, you're it.